The Yosenju archetype has always been one of those decks seemingly forever on the verge of a breakthrough on the competitive stage, yet never actually achieving it. The real question, then, is what has held Yosenju back? Do they still need that one or two critical elements of support, or is it popular deck design that's restrict Yosenju potential? Perhaps this deck design is the one that helps Yosenju take their place at the top level. Or maybe not, but I certainly like it. Yosenju decks have the same general problem as Spirit decks due to their return to hand mechanic. However, unlike Spirit decks, they have an inherent swarming tactic and effects that typically produce large back and forth swings of momentum. Therefore, in my opinion, the construction of a good Yosenju deck is to control these momentum swings as best you can to maximize win probability. Not something that's really earth-shattering, I know. First, addressing the monsters. One of the big differences between my build and a number of the other builds that I've seen is that I value certain high-level monsters versus just the level 4 Yosenju monsters. One of the issues I question with the supposed common Yosenju build is that the low monster count and reliance on back row lead to significant levels of inefficiency. Back row reliance in the current meta is even more risky than previously due to the existence of Twin Twister. Also, the presence of both Forerunner and Dark Destroyer for Cosmos, and Mega Monarchs and March of the Monarchs mean that just running the level 4s is typically not enough to win with any level of real consistency. Therefore, running some of the higher level monsters is essential. However, it is important to note that while Pendulum Summoning can resolve the inherent field control problems for a Yosenju deck, most of the time it results in a less efficient deck because most decks are more geared to addressing special summoning versus normal summoning. It's not to say that you can't do it from time to time, but to do it as a hedge against being OTK'd, typically not a good idea in my opinion. Fortunately, the multiple normal summoning strings associated with Yosenjus remedy the tribute detriment of these high-level monsters as well. With that said, starting off I run 2 copies of my Yosenju Daibak as the heavy hitter of the deck. Both the Pendulum Effect and Monster Effect have their uses. With a pendulum scale of 7, Daibak has the potential to aid in special summoning all relevant monsters if so desired. The attack addition also significantly increases the probability of OTKing because it'll add 9 to 1200 extra damage, and combine that with 1 or 2 Gaga Cowboys, and that will typically take you over the edge despite maybe using anything like Upstart Goblin. It also allows you to get over some of the more beefy monsters that you might face, as in combination with Tsujik, 1300 extra attack can go a long way. In this build, the protection effect associated with being pendulum summoned is irrelevant because it'll never actually be activated, but the bounce effect is still potentially valuable for eliminating monster obstacles, increasing OTK probability. Finally, Daibak has a nice body in combination with Secret Move, which can offer protection from card effects and create some form of field presence. Misak is another quality high-level Yosenju monster, and really is your out to basically everything in the meta outside of Crystal and Clearwing Synchro Dragons, because almost nothing in the meta is wind that has enough attack power that this thing just can't run over it if it doesn't need to access its effect. Misak is another great field controller in combination with Secret Move. It's actually typically better than Daibak because Daibak can die by battle. Misak basically almost never gets killed by battle. While Pendulum Summoning this card is possible, the occurrence is rather unlikely. Maggot is not a bad card, but Misak is just significantly better. Maggot can get both Misak and Daibak from the deck, but with such low attack power, it's difficult to really put a value on the card when you could just run more copies of either Misak or Daibak. If Misak stayed on the field after Maggot special summoned it from the deck, then maybe you could find a place for 1 copy, but that's not what happens. Misak returns to the hand. So no copies in my deck. If Oyam did not require sending a Yosenju monster to the graveyard from your hand, then it would be a very nice choice for this deck. Unfortunately, that lost card is meaningful. There are basically better choices to mitigating direct attacking that don't force you to give up such resources. The 4 major level 4 Yosenju monsters are all added generating the basic monster structure and heavily assisting the summons of your higher level monsters. In my opinion, the most important Yosenju is Kama 1 due to the bounce effect. Kama 3 is obviously also very important because of its search effect that allows you to acquire any Yosenju card, including the higher level monsters, and a specially secret move to stymie your opponent's next turn. Kama 2 is probably the least impressive of the four from an effect standpoint, as attacking directly for 900,000 has limited usefulness, but because it does continue the summons loop, which ensures the usefulness of the deck, it is still an important addition. Finally, Tsujik is important due to its attack increasing attributes both on the field and in the hand, especially for getting over those Mega Monarchs, but on its own, it's kind of dead. Overall, I run 3 copies of Kama 1, 3 copies of Kama 3, 2 copies of Kama 2, and 2 copies of Tsujik. The two no tribute pendulum monsters are basically night and day in my opinion. First, Day in Shinchu L, an excellent pendulum effect, which protects against destruction by either battle or card effect. Not surprisingly, the battle protection effect is rather situational to the point where it is not really meaningful at all, but the effect protection is outstanding, especially with respects to quashing Bottomless Trap Hold, Torrential Tribute, and those individuals that still run Mirror Force instead of another one of its variants. Sadly, the other Mirror Force variants have taken a little of the usefulness away from L, but it's still worth running. The target magnet effect is also nice when you put it on the field in the summoning chain, but it's also kind of situational because a lot of targeting effects have either left the meta or they'll be activated on summons rather than when Kama 1 uses its effect. The final advantage to L is you can put it in your pendulum zone and now Secret Move is live. So when all your level 4s bounce back to your hand, it's okay. You can turn over a Secret Move because L's technically on the field and is a Yosenju monster. And boom, there you go, you can stymie play a little. So, while L used to be unbelievable, it's still very high quality. Then there's the Knight in Shinchu R. Wow, is this card bad. I think I should make a documentary about its pendulum effect called This is Yu-Gi-Oh! But this pendulum scale goes to 11. If you didn't get that reference, then you are certainly younger than I am. But seriously, the pendulum effect does nothing but allow you to pendulum summon Daibak, which really is not nearly valuable enough to warrant running it. Its monster effect is also rather sad because it's only relevant when you're doing a lot of high-frequency Yosenju pendulum summoning, and Yosenju decks really aren't built for pendulum summoning right now, so they should try to kind of shy away from it. I run 0 copies. Fortunately, whether by design or accident, Daibak's pendulum scale, as mentioned, is 7. Thus, it and L can handle any non-Daibak based pendulum summoning you want to engage in, if so desired. Finally, rounding out the monsters, I run 2 copies of Speedroid Menko to help neutralize large-scale attacks against my field, as well as produce a win monster that can be utilized during my next turn more often than not, either as for an XZ summon, Lightning Chidori, or as tribute fodder for a higher level Yosenju. Getting rid of Menko is definitely advisable because Secret Move does not activate when a non-Yosenju monster is on the field. Moving on to the spells, I run only 1 Raigeki, as Soul Charge is not typically effective in this deck for obvious reasons. Most of the time your monster is going to be in your hand, not in your graveyard. Due to the swarming nature of Yosenju, draw power is definitely needed to ensure hand size and deck speed. Unfortunately, with the limiting of Upstart from 3 to 1, the deck speed of Yosenju has taken a little bit of a hit because it really just wasn't filler. It was kind of almost quasi-essential to the deck build. However, Pot of Duality is still at 3 and I run 3 copies. With all of the level 4 Yosenjus having Beast Warrior types, running 3 copies of Tenki is a no-brainer and staple in the deck. Also, because Yosenjus have the Spirit-like Return to Hand characteristic, I like running 3 copies of Creature Swap, which basically becomes a permanent change of heart for the simple cost of not attacking your Yosenju monster that you give to your opponent. And if the situation calls for it, feel free to run them over. Win the game. I run one copy of One Day of Peace, for Yosenjus are a major combo deck, and One Day definitely helps the combo engine by getting you those 2 extra cards, one off one day, one off your next draw phase, because you're not going to lose the game during your opponent's next turn. And it helps ward off those OTKs when you have that empty field. Finally, closing out the spells, I run one copy of Unconventional Choice in Divine Wind of the Mist Valley. My Yosenjus bounce back to my hand during my end phase. I'm able to special summon a level 4 lower wind monster from my deck to provide some level of defense so that I'm still around to counterattack during my next turn if I don't have other defensive options available. It's especially nice when I can put an L on the field or any other Yosenju monster to make a secret move that I have face down live during my opponent's turn. However, I do appreciate that this choice is somewhat unconventional. For the trap cards at this moment, I run my 3 general staples, 1 Torrential Tribute, 1 Bottomless Trap Hole, and 1 Solemn Warning. I run the 1 allowable copy of Vanity's Emptiness, as Yosenju are a principal normal summoning deck, thus they're not bothered at all by Vanity's Emptiness. Also, due to the field presence provided by both Daibak and Misak, as well as the Pendulum Zone occupancy capacity for L, running 3 copies of Secret Move is definitely a no-brainer, and is certainly high quality. For the finals, there are numerous options. You can run Lose 1 Turn, Scrap Iron Scarecrow. It's better than you think in this deck. You get that major battle damage negation on a continuous nature. Be Gone Knave, you open your opponent's field up for your massive Yosenju counterattack. Macrocosmos, or something else. And for me, I like running 3 copies of Storming Mirror Force, which will be replaced by Rippling Mirror Force when it's released in the next set. Moving on, obviously the extra deck should primarily consist of rank 4 monsters, but almost any monster number requirement is fortunately open because of Yosenju swarming. Therefore, my extra deck is as followed. I run 1 number 85 Crazy Box. Yosenju's worst nightmare is a field with skill drain. Crazy Box gives this deck something of a fighting chance. 1 Evilswarm Ouroboros, 1 Fire Fist Tiger King, 1 Lightning Chidori, 1 number 80 Rhapsody, 1 number 101, 1 Castel, 1 XZ Dragon, 1 number 106 Giant Hand, yay, it's available for the common man now, 1 number 52 Diamond Crab King, 1 Abyss Dweller, 1 39 Utopia, and 1 S39 Utopia the Lightning, and finally I run 2 Gaga Cowboys. It's not difficult to get 4 Yosenju monsters on the field. After you do all your damage, trade both of them in for 2 Cowboys, do an extra 1600 damage, typically ends the duel. So, final thoughts on Yosenju. I wonder what happened to Yosenju, especially in this meta without Nekroz running amok. It has a good matchup against Monarchs, a solid matchup against PK Fire, various Pendulum builds, Pure Burning Abyss, Mermail, and any anti-meta heroes type deck. However, I guess it was abandoned because a number of people thought it auto-lost to Cosmos. That's not really an outlandish statement for the more conventional build, but in my experience, this build does not auto-lose to Cosmos. Yes, Cosmos still have the advantage, but it can compete against Cosmos rather effectively. Overall, all Yosenjus really need, in my opinion, to jump to Tier 1 is a high-quality rank 4 XZ monster that uses Yosenju as material. A Kama 4 would be nice too, but they really need that XZ monster. The lack of that XZ monster notwithstanding, seriously, where are the Yosenju decks? Let's see them. Come on, let's start winning some top 32s with Yosenju. Well, that's my Yosenju deck. Thank you for your attention and your time. I'm out.